Sam had David Dane on last week. Very important interview on the most important sort of lessons from the WikiLeaks interviews, WikiLeaks emails. Uh, I think there's three ways to look at them. One way is the Clinton spin, which is that this is all a Russian conspiracy.
Might be doctored.
Might be doctored. You know, again, I I would say if they were doctored, I would look for some stronger denials than they might be doctored. There could be a Russian connection. Certainly, the intelligence agencies point to that, but I don't take the intelligence agencies, on blind faith. Although it's obvious that Russia, just as the United States does, takes an active interest in promoting its interest and interferes in other elections and promotes neo-fascist candidates in Europe. There's very little doubt that the Russians would prefer Trump. And again, paradoxically, this is a time where we need to de-escalate with Russia. I would like to see the Democrats get a little bit back to 2012 mode, where they were mocking Mitt Romney for being bellicose on Russia. Now they make Mitt Romney look like a pussycat. So yes, there are hypocrisies there and some potentially very troubling policy orientations. Now the second view is that the WikiLeaks emails are this sort of vast, grand conspiracy, and it's revealing everything. And I think that there's some sort of overstep and melodrama. And number three is to just look at okay, again, they're a bit more damning. The DNC emails really showed nothing. These are a little bit more problematic. In a way that is not positive, none of this should be a surprise. Of course, the Democratic establishment and many mainstream journalists preferred Hillary Clinton to Bernie Sanders. You didn't need any type of email dump for you to know that. That was implicit in the primary. It was implicit in Bernie Sanders' critique when he ran. It's implicit in the critique of this show. And again, there's certain areas that show that the Clintons are getting Hillary's more aware of the pressures and the changing nature of the party. There was a willingness to flip on TPP, and there's also things like public and private position. She did not mean it in this vindictive, conspiratorial way that people are interpreting it. Now, you can still say no. Hillary Clinton, based on her record, which is absolutely a very, very, very pro-corporate, very establishment record, and her politics are clearly not of a particularly progressive orientation, that you don't want to put trust in her. That's a fine and legitimate argument. But she did not. She meant, in a classical sense, that of course there is some distinction in the process of negotiating legislation between public advocacy and private position. You would not find even Bernie Sanders would agree with that. There is nothing radical or controversial about that statement. Now, this is all sort of a prelude to say that there's some recent reporting in Huffington Post that says Hillary Clinton seems very serious about thumping big business. And there's reports, there's a very good piece by George Packer on Hillary Clinton and the populist revolt. He talked to her. And I think that the way you can interpret it is this. Hillary Clinton is the consummate establishment politician. I don't think that there is a single sort of era in politics where she deviated from the mainstream consensus. So in the 90s, it was, deregulate, blah, blah, blah. She was pretty much there, invade Iraq. Everybody supported invading Iraq. She was there. Now there is a shift amongst some members of the elite, at least the more liberal elite, that there is a recognition, even amongst people like Larry Summers, who have come out for interventions in the tax code, who have come out and said we need new infrastructure spending. When you read the pages of places like the Financial Times, which I would recommend, these are like the real papers of the sort of actual elite but rigorous opinion. There's serious thinking about automation, inequality. It's there. It's on the radar. And if you look at her discussions and her proposals on raising the minimum wage, on infrastructure spending, on targeted taxes on poverty relief. There is a shift there. She recognizes to some degree what's going on. That's one piece of it. Then there's the political positioning of there's a different attitude towards business, which I would still be incredibly wary of, because the Clintons and Tim Kaine absolutely, within the context of the present Democratic Party, are far more close to corporate power than the more ascendant kind of grassroots wing. And in this piece, they take as the example of this notion of this proposed merger between AT&T and its bid to acquire Time Warner. Now, this is a sort of great and clear-cut example of a area in media concentration that already has far too much monopoly. It's bad for consumers. It's bad for democracy. It closes off voices. And we need, of course, much less concentration. Now, even you could say, hey, the internet, it's opened up all these new venues of communication. The platforms are still incredibly narrow. So we need to have a conversation about platforms, not just what's distributed on them. Now, Donald Trump sees an opportunity here, and this would be like if he wasn't so deranged and demented and was running a smart campaign. He's come out against this. This would be the type of sort of unconventional, savvy move that he could get some traction on. And Al Franken has been critical of the merger. Tim Kaine was on Meet the Press. He was talking with Chuck Todd about it. And Chuck Todd asked him about Franken's skepticism. And this is what Tim Kaine said. Tim Kaine said, response to Franken's concern about the AT&T Time Warner merger, I share those concerns and questions. We've got to get to the bottom of them. We are generally pro-competition, and less concentration, I think, is generally helpful, especially in the media. But this has just been announced, and I haven't had a chance to dig into the details, but these are the kinds of questions that we need to be asking. Now, I would not take that to the bank at all. I think it's important that they feel a need to go in that direction. And that's a great example of the smart response is, okay, they clearly feel pressure on this issue. You go back to the 1990s, the Telecommunications Act, Bill Clinton, everybody else were doing incredible deregulations and allowing of monopoly and concentration in media and many other places in the corporate sector. Now you have even a Democrat like Tim Kaine, who's obviously, at least on economic and corporate issues, more to the center right. They feel and see that pressure. Now you can say, oh, well, they're lying, fuck them, they stole it from Bernie, whatever. I would say they feel that heat. And the day, and through the election, that's why I'm talking about it now, and the day they win, issues like that need to be on a list of non-negotiable demands in which you inflict pressure on them from.
If there was an RNC leaks, their emails on these topics would not be showing sensitivity to that sort of thing.
Not in the slightest. And again, that's the structural understanding of politics that goes far beyond personalities, that reacts to incentive structures. So even in the 1990s, when the Democratic Party was significantly more to the right than it is today, there was not a strong left. There was not a sense of structural inequality. And the corporate sector was completely ascendant. And in fact, in relation to the conversation today, admired and valorized far more than it is today. And there was a general belief that a rising tide lifts all boats. Now, that's obviously not true. And the Democratic Party has the constituency within inside it that can present that institutional pressure. The Republican Party does not. And that is a basic and radical distinction.
Hey, it's Sam Seder. Why don't you subscribe to this channel? You can do so right over here. Subscribe.